Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us for tonight's session, Unmute Your Microphone, How to Prevent Burnout by Speaking Up. I'm Annalise. Some of you might recognize me. I've been moderating the sessions for this year of SHLA. If you're new, nice to meet you. Happy to have you here. Just some quick things. I want to give a shout out to our sponsors for this program. We have Amateur Radio and Digital Communications, Danaher Corporation, General Motors, and Turner Construction. And then really quick, I just want to go over some house rules, just things for like how the session's going to work. If you guys have any questions throughout the session, I recommend writing them down on a sticky note or a piece of paper next to you. You can always put them in the chat, but sometimes they get lost. But just make sure you note your questions somewhere because there will be a Q&A session at the end. There will be an optional discussion question posted on the Slack channel. I mentioned this last night, but if some of you are still having trouble accessing that, please send an email to outreach@swe.org so that we can note your name. And then whenever we get that issue fixed, we'll send you a new invite. But it's optional, so not a big deal if you can't do this one. Everybody always use the SHLA links resource document as a reference point. The video on demand recording of last night's session was just like that link was just added on there. So if you missed that last night and you want to watch it, the link is there. The link for the recording of tonight's session will be put on there within the next day or so. And then all of the post-session survey links are also in that document. So if you ever are needing anything, it's probably going to be in there. But as always, you can email outreach@swe.org with any other questions that you have. I'm gonna pivot completely into our session tonight. Tonight we have Dr. Korie Grayson. She is like a really amazing person doing so much good work. We were kind of talking about schooling before and just her journey, and I know she'll tell us about her journey tonight. She is a biomedical engineer, chemical engineering researcher, and a diversity advocate in STEM. And I'm really excited for all of us to get to hear her presentation tonight. So Korie, I'm gonna pass it on to you.
I'm sorry, taking myself off mute. Hi, everybody. Good night or good evening, depending on where you're from. Thank you so much for being here today, taking the time to listen to this talk about unmuting your microphone in order to prevent burnout. So how many of us, and put just a 1 in the chat if you have experienced burnout before. So if you could, just real quick, just put 1 if you've experienced kind of that tiredness, irritability, felt overwhelmed to the point even sometimes where you're I'm a night person to where I'm like, you can't do everything, you need to go to sleep. So yeah, a fair amount of us have experienced burnout. And a lot of that kind of starts with kind of speaking up and knowing how to speak up for yourself. So I'll go into this talk. So quick overview. I'm gonna go a little bit about my STEM journey because I am a scientist. Then go through the 5 stages of burnout and what that looks like. And then move on to the steps for practicing self-advocacy, so speaking up. And then also moving to a step that sometimes we have really difficult time with, which is saying no. So just a quick overview, my journey kind of started off when my mom and my dad, Yvonne and Eddie, met each other back in the summer of 1985. They were young military people about to start their careers, and they ended up having me and my older brother. So yes, I came with someone that already annoyed me and burned me out for birth, but real loving sibling relationships. Sometimes we're actually very competitive. To this day, he thinks I'm the favorite. Well, he knows I'm the favorite. I think I'm the favorite. And so we kind of have that nice friendly sibling rivalry. But, parents ended up getting a divorce and they ended up being stationed at different places. So in high school, I actually spent the last 2 years of my high school career at Maury High School, which is in Norfolk, Virginia. And there was actually when I figured out that I really enjoyed STEM, and that was in my AP Chem class. So I played basketball at the time, and I really liked photography, so that's kind of really what I wanted to do. But I think having a young, vibrant teacher that was really interested in making sure we understood chemistry and the principles and how it applied to everyday life really sparked my interest in chemistry and also calculus. I took AP calculus as well, and that helped me get into college. So my senior year, instead of being relaxed and chill, no, my guidance counselor was like, you're going to take all these AP classes, you're going to apply to all these schools, do all these essays, and we're going to get you into college. I ended up applying to over 14 schools and got, I think, almost 400,000 in scholarships. So I got into all of them, but I ended up choosing the school down the street, which was Norfolk State University. So Norfolk State University is an HBCU, which is historically Black college or university in Norfolk, Virginia. And that was where I ended up majoring in chemistry, pre-med. So thought I was going to be a different type of doctor than what I am now. I was going to do the MD track. And so, again, bringing in that sibling rivalry, you can see that's me and my brother down here. My brother, I actually graduated a week before him. So I am a first generation student and actually can be the first person and claim to be the first person that got their degree in our family. But really, my brother graduated literally a week after me. He spent 5 years of school, I spent 4. But again, I get to claim that title. So then after that, I'm like, well, what am I going to do? So because I had that pre-med portion at the end of my degree, I think I'm going to do an MD. But I also really liked research. As I said earlier in the call, I did a summer internship. I did several and realized I like being on the lab bench and figuring out things and using the scientific method to achieve a certain goal. And so I went to combine them. So there are what we call MD PhD programs where you can do both. But no one told me, A, that the MCAT was going to be so hard. And then B, that MD PhD programs are way more competitive than regular MD programs or even regular PhD programs. So instead of like 50 to 100 slots or for an MD program, you're actually left to 1 or 2. And so they're extremely competitive. And needless to say, I didn't get any of them. So that was kind of heartbreaking because, I'm this first generation student, got this degree, and, I'm supposed to be figuring out the next steps. And it kind of led to this moment, this period in my life where I was kind of all over the place. So some people like to take a gap year afterwards. I took, I guess, 2, but I really didn't have a plan. I kind of just figured it out on the way to go. So I talked to my aunt and was like, Auntie, I really need a place to stay. I don't want to live with my parents anymore. Can I stay with you in Atlanta? And she said, sure. And she let me live with her for 2 years. That was my roommate. And so during that time, I couldn't get a job for some reason, even with my bachelor's in chemistry. So I did what I knew how to do, which was work retail. When I was 16 years old, my very first job was working at Journeys. And so I knew shoes, I knew clothes, I knew fashion. So I started working at Macy's. And so I worked there for about a year, all different departments from shoes to watches as a retail associate, and realized after a while, I did like the job because of discounted perks, but I'm like, I need to find something else because this is not in my degree. I also worked at SunTrust. I was a bank teller. And I will say, at least from that job, I think I learned a lot of useful skills, such as, of course, counting, being kind of quick, money management, and also learning not to judge people by the way that they look. A lot of people would come in, maybe suited down, and maybe only have $5 in their account. But then you would see another person who you wouldn't expect to be a millionaire have millions in their account. Because as a bank teller, you see everything in someone's account. So then after that, again, okay, I'm still not doing what I'm supposed to be doing. So let's kind of figure this out for it. And so with that, I ended up applying to a job to CryoLife. CryoLife is a biomedical device company in Kennesaw, Georgia. They started off with valve transplants and then soon moved into biomedical devices like the one below, which is the Hero device. So that's what I worked on. So the Hero device is basically a dialysis graft. And so you inserted it, so I'm trying to get my things right, inserted into a patient's arm and it connected their vein and their artery. So when they would undergo dialysis, they actually had like a functional vein artery network. So a lot of times when patients undergo dialysis on a frequent basis, their veins will stenose, or what we call collapse. And so then you have to find another vein, but there's only so many veins in your arm, right? So this was like a kind of improvement step for patients at that point in that stage. So I ended up working there in kind of more like a manufacturing assembly. Like I was literally covered in head to toe with PPE. Only thing you maybe could see was my eyes. But it was really fun. And I got a little taste of the regulatory life, such as the FDA would walk in, that's the Federal Drug Administration, and they'd Food and Drug Administration, sorry. They'd walk in and really intense those days because, you got to make sure you cross those T's, dot those I's, or you could be shut down immediately. So watching that, I realized in order to move up the chain in that type of environment, or just to kind of have a more of a leadership role, I either needed another degree, a higher degree, or I had to be there for 20 plus years. And so time I didn't like, wasn't on my side. So I decided to go back to grad school. And so that's when I went to and got accepted into the Biomedical Engineering program at Cornell University. And so ended up meeting Michael King, who was my PI. He was really interested in drug delivery, cancer, specifically for cancer. So I was able to, in a nutshell, use tiny particles in an anti-cancer agent that was attached to it and able to kill cancer cells, which was the basis of my research. Ended up moving to Vanderbilt, anybody in the Nashville area, one of my favorite places, mid-PhD, and finished my work there. And so I graduated, but I didn't have a graduation ceremony, didn't have really the public defense that most people have because COVID hit. And so that kind of really shut everything down and kind of shifted also my trajectory as well. But super proud, I think my parents were, and also maybe really just a little bit jealous because now there was finally a doctor in the family. Different kind of doctor, but still a doctor. So then we moved on after that, and I did a postdoc. So a postdoc is just something you do after your PhD. Went to the University of Michigan, and there I was a postdoc for 2 years. Really got to interact with a lot of grad students because I was just a grad student. Kind of got a taste of what running a lab was like. Although I enjoyed the students that I worked with, I realized that I really think I wanted to do science policy. And so I applied and got a very prestigious fellowship, the AAAS Science and Technology Policy Fellowship. And I'm super happy about that. Again, that FDA experience at my one job kind of pushed me in that direction, I think, a little bit. But I got placed at the National Science Foundation. I don't know if you guys are very familiar with that, but it's responsible for a lot of funding that a lot of research universities get. And so there is a new directorate called TIP, which is Technology, Innovation, and Partnerships. That's the directorate that I was placed in. And so a lot of great programs are coming to fund a lot of different diversity workforce initiatives in the emerging technology space. So that is artificial intelligence, quantum technology, advanced wireless, biotechnology. And so I get to kind of see that other side and I see that intersection of science and policy, and also see how we get to fund great initiatives that kind of create a better workforce. So that's just a quick overview of my background. And so we're going to kind of move into burnout. And so during all of this, of course, I experienced burnout. There were times where I just, at least for me, burnout manifests in ways where I'm very tired, I'm apathetic, I procrastinate a lot, I sleep a lot to help avoid and deal with my problems. And so I think when I got more into this stage, it's really about trying to understand burnout and what are the signs and what are the symptoms. And so that's what we're going to do here today. So burnout can definitely affect anyone at any time. There was even a recent study that shown that the average professional experiences burnout around 32, which is around my age. So with any illness, symptoms of burnout change from person to person, but they can be identified in 5 different stages. And so those 5 different stages are the honeymoon phase, that onset of stress, that chronic stress that we feel, which actually then leads to burnout, but then we also have habitual burnout, which is where it happens again and again and again, right? Or we just haven't figured out a way to really climb out of that burnout. So in those symptoms, it could be initially that increased commitment to your goals, then leading to a reduced commitment towards either maybe your pay, well, for high school, but maybe family or work. You don't feel like doing it as much, and you feel like there's this increased demand. Also, your emotions may start changing, maybe depression or aggression, or maybe you're like a little snappy. Cognitive performance, I know sometimes I can feel mine suffer when I'm getting into stages of burnout, as well as even my creativity. So these are just some of the signs, but also we're going to go into the different stages of burnout. So oftentimes when we undertake a new task, maybe do a new job, a new internship, maybe learning to play something new, we often start by experiencing these very high kind of feelings of job satisfaction. And you feel very committed, you have a high energy, and maybe you're at the tip of your creativity. So this is, again, for like a new job or a new venture, we have these kind of signs and these symptoms. So the theory is, if you create good coping strategies at this stage, then hopefully you will stay at the honeymoon stage indefinitely. That is all nice in theory, but in actuality, that changes. So again, I think a lot in this phase, and this is kind of where I'm at with my new job. Again, I feel, a little bit of a compulsion to prove myself. I do feel a sense of creativity because I'm in a new directorate, so we have a lot of freedom to figure out a lot of these new things. Very productive. I do a lot of Zoom meetings in a lot of Microsoft Teams, and I say yes, maybe a little bit more than I should, but I'm taking things on, kind of figuring out what I like, what I don't like, and things will go from there, evolve from there. It's my thinking. But then we kind of move on to, again, this kind of stress. So again, we're using this metaphor of like a battery as far as charging. So the second stage of burnout is really kind of that onset of stress. So it begins kind of with this awareness that some days are just a little bit more difficult than others. So you kind of find your optimism waning a little bit, those kind of common signs of stress, whether it's physical, mental, emotional. I felt like that earlier today because I had some real tight deadlines this week and next week. So I can start to feel that stress of the job and the things that I'm doing come together. Even before I was in the meeting, it has nothing to do with my job, and we have pressing deadlines for that. And so the stress sometimes can be building without you even realizing it. So inability to focus is definitely one of the symptoms. Sometimes I don't realize it, but I'm on my phone and I should be focusing on something that's going on in the meeting. Irritability. Sometimes my mom will call me in the middle of the day and she already knows, like, okay, she can hear the tone in my voice, she's like, let me call you back, or just call me back when you're done, because she already knows I might be a little stressed. Reduce sleep quality. Sleep is so important for so many reasons. So, if you're noticing your reduction in sleep, maybe you're having some stress going on. So again, lower productivity, lack of social interactions, or maybe you're just supposed to meet up with your friend and then you're not because you're just so stressed out. Anxiety, again, is a top one. I know we all have some type of anxiety and it manifests in different ways, whether it's physical, mental, or emotional. There's so many different things, right, that come with this onset of stress. So then it kind of brings us down to another level. Now we're in chronic stress, and this is our third stage of burnout. So again, even heightened more stress levels. We're going from motivation to now experiencing stress on an incredibly frequent basis. This was my stress, which is isolated today, or so I'm thinking, but we'll see as the week progresses and as next week progresses, where again, I have kind of these more increased symptoms. So tiredness, procrastination, there's definitely some things I put off that I probably should do, resentfulness, again, social withdrawal. I think I was supposed to meet up with a friend, and then now I just got too much going on. Let me talk to you later. Again, apathy, a cynical attitude. I get very sarcastic when I'm tired, so I already know, okay, maybe I'm a little stressed. Again, other things, feeling threatened, a lot of problems, feeling pressured, and sometimes even consumption of substances that we would normally not think would be a big deal. Whether it's wine, I know if I have more than one glass of wine, I might be stressed about something. But it's just cognizant to think of these signs when you are being stressed and seeing how things change in your life. The next step, which is our stage, our fourth stage, is burnout itself. And so this is where symptoms become very critical. So you can try to continue as normal as often, but it's not possible in this state because it becomes increasingly difficult to cope. So we all have our own unique limits of tolerance, but it's key to see intervention at this stage. And so with burnout, this is time to start talking to people, start talking to a therapist, realizing that now you have physical symptoms. And some of my friends, again, they manifest as headaches, as GI problems, or even they get physically sick because their body's in stress. When your body's in stress, that increases your likelihood of getting sick. So again, these are all things to keep in mind when you're thinking of burnout. And then our final stage, which is habitual burnout. And this is a place you do not want to go. This is when your battery is completely tapped and completely drained. And so this means that this is so embedded in your life that you are likely to experience kind of significant ongoing mental, physical, and emotional problems. And again, this is the important step where your mental health is now clearly being affected, and it increases your likelihood of getting burnout happening again and again. And so people are now forced to work remotely. And so the pandemic definitely has had an effect where we're not around people and around workers to kind of speed off of and, you know, kind of have these, I guess, kind of instances where we are setting personal boundaries and having that separation from our personal and work lives. But when you're at home, your work life and your personal life kind of will be integrated. So it's kind of figuring out those ways to not integrate them so that way you don't get to this level of burnout. So the question becomes, how do we recharge? And so I'm going to ask a quick question to the audience. If you can, just input into the chat, what are some of the ways that you recharge when you're feeling those symptoms in those ways of burnout? Is it talking to your friends? Is it going out and, you know, playing a sport or doing an activity? Is it scrolling through social media? Like, what are your ways when you recharge when you're feeling burnout? Just like one or two. So listening to music. Oh, I love music. That is definitely one of my, I listen to music every single day. I'm definitely the queen of naps. So that's good. Going on a walk. Those are all really, really great answers. And those definitely fit with the ways that we need to recharge, right? So, but with the first one that comes with recharging is paying attention to the signs. You guys now all have symptoms of each burnout stage, and you'll receive a copy of this presentation as well. Where you can be like, okay, am I feeling this way? Do I feel like I'm at this stage? You can actually now be cognizant of what is going on versus just kind of letting it take over and run amok, right? So always paying attention to the signs. And then another one, stop saying yes, and you should probably say no. A lot of burnout comes from us taking on additional things that we really probably shouldn't or can't in our life. But again, wanting to prove yourself, wanting to show that you're confident, wanting having this high energy, maybe creativity. A lot of times we may feel that way, but sometimes we should say no, or maybe right now, instead of just yes. Another is adjusting your workload. I know sometimes as high school students, like for me, when I was taking all those AP classes, I really couldn't adjust my workload because I had to graduate in college. But if you're moving on and you're working, maybe not taking on as many tasks at work, making sure that you have that balance, making sure people know like, hey, you know, I'm busy during this week. I really can't handle anything else. Those are just some of the ways. Mental health days are always good. At my new job, they're always telling me to learn to say no, although I'm pretty good at it already. But also we have sometimes those days where you let someone know like, hey, you know, today I just need to take a day to myself, or you don't have to tell anybody that. You're just like, hey, I'm taking the day, and you go figure whatever you need to figure out, or take that rest and that relaxation that you need. And then lastly is talking about it. My mom is literally one of my best friends. So that's the first person that I run to whenever I'm feeling stressed out. And she's just that person that's just going to listen, not necessarily always offer suggestions, which may not be what you're looking for, but just someone there to really be like, okay, just tell me, I'm listening. Let's just figure out a way for you to kind of get through this and get past this. But yeah, going outside, going for a walk, watching a TV show. I watch a lot of mindless reality TV. Don't judge me. It's my thing. We're just going to let it go. But that just lets me kind of relax, right? Hang out with friends, again, me time. These are all great answers to how we can recharge. So in recharging in that space where I was in STEM, I like to create spaces for underrepresented minorities in STEM. And so that led a lot into my advocacy journey. And so with that, it actually led to a lot more social media initiative now I think about it. But I was able to find and create space and create community, specifically in a space in STEM where I didn't often see people that looked like me. So one of those initiatives was Women Doing Science, and that was the Instagram page. You can definitely follow it. We ended up growing that page to almost 95,000 followers, but the best parts, I think, out of that page was we were able to establish a travel fund for BIPOC, but mostly women, kind of in the geosciences space to go to conferences. And we were actually able to publish a paper to show the impact of actually having more relatable STEM images of women in different fields, in different countries, even their captions in different languages, but having all this representation and showing that people can better develop, specifically younger people can better develop their STEM identities when they see different representations of specifically women in STEM. So super excited about that. That was published a couple of months ago. I also do the STEM Success Summit. So that's a virtual STEM conference. We're in our 4th year, about to go into our 5th. And so we were able to have that for young STEM professionals who either were interested in kind of starting or kind of continuing the career in STEM and giving them the tools to really figure that out specifically for underrepresented minorities. We've had some great speakers like Dr. Kazmika Corbett, who was one of the main scientists for the Moderna vaccine. And even Michael Gardner, if you ever seen The Pursuit of Happiness, Will Smith and his son played in that. That was about him. He came and spoke with our audience as well. And then I also do STEM Noir, which is a wellness to research conference for Black women in STEM. And that's actually coming up soon in Puerto Rico. So it's a nice R&R when I go to Puerto Rico. And I also do different things where I give talks, have different courses and workshops about self-advocacy. And so we're gonna move right into that. And so what is self-advocacy? So self-advocacy is learning basically how to stand up for yourself and speak up for yourself. And so you're making your own decisions, you're letting people know how to treat you, you're learning about different information so you can make kind of informed decisions based off of your interests, problem solving, learning about your responsibilities. But what it is that self-determination and that self-agency that sometimes people may lack going through life. For me, self-advocacy, again, started very young. I think sometimes having an older brother and even like sibling and kind of fighting for yourself and fighting for attention kind of really started that journey. But then parents teaching me, making me set up my own disappointments and, make sure I always ask for a discount and being able to just use my voice. I can say one thing about my parents is they never made me feel any different or like I couldn't do anything. Just like my brother, they treat us both equally. I think that helped with my self-agency and self-advocacy growing up. So now that you know the definition of self-advocacy, let's talk about the steps for practicing self-advocacy. And so that is number 1, knowing yourself. The second one is knowing your values and your needs. And then the last one is knowing how to get them. The last one is usually my favorite because that has a lot to do with conflict resolution and negotiation and that kind of nitty-gritty part that some people shy away from. But I've been taking negotiation and conflict resolution courses, so I feel way more confident to do that part of self-advocacy. Again, speaking up and using the tools, right? So let's start with the very first one, which is knowing yourself. And that's kind of more of that I am statement. And so what you can do, and I'm about to put the link in the chat, is use this source and kind of figure out who you are as a person, right? So the 20 statements test is used to examine various ways of like self-concept and how that can be defined. So it is a very well-known instrument that is widely used to measure that self-concept. So it was originally developed in the 1950s by a social psychologist as a way of determining the degree to which we can be able to base our self-concepts on in our membership in different groups. But I like to use it because I think it really starts with you figuring out kind of who you are, the identities that you have or that you carry. Normally, this would be something that we could do, but just for the sake of time, I want everybody to just kind of look at click on the link and look at the kind of prompts. And if you can, in the chat, just put in a statement about yourself, like, I am anything, and we'll kind of move forward after that. So again, it's not about importance or like ranking things. It's just like who you are. Like, I am an introvert. I am a Black woman. I am, for some people, maybe for your religious denomination. So if you can or open to, please put it in the chat so that way we can kind of see a little bit of that self-concept coming to life. And so as I said earlier, that part of I am and those feelings of self-concept, it is really, sometimes it's people, they really identify with their race and their ethnicity. It could be a different ability, something that we don't see. Are they neurodivergent, ADHD? A person that has ADHD, that could be something as well. Age, religion, culture. Again, I said introversion, extroversion earlier. Personality as interest. But please use that sheet to kind of start figuring out who you are as a person and how you can really delve into that idea of self-concept. So I'm going to come back to that one. The next one is kind of knowing your values. And so your core values, I think, are not a matter of chance. So they're a result of your beliefs, your upbringing, your environment, where you live, and so many other factors. So all of these elements kind of help mark and shape your personality. And they are what make you you, which is a very unique person, right? We're all not the same. So also put in the chat a reference that you can use to kind of find what your values are. So for me, advocacy is a top value. Happiness is one of my values. And it could be beauty, wisdom, trustworthiness. There are so many different values out. What I will note is you can't pick all the values, right? Because if you pick all the values, then none of them are priority. And you have to have priority. So I say at least pick 5 from this list, and that link will help you figure out what those 4 to 5 are. And those are values that you can stick with your personal values. And this helps inform a lot of the ways you may interact with your environment, with other people. And so that helps bring me to the mission statement. And so the mission statement is your personal mission statement. It's very similar to a corporate mission statement. So it describes your convictions, what you stand for, and how you create a life that embodies those values. So in other words, it's your personal definition of success, one that is separate from the approval of others. So it's usually a short statement, no longer than 3 sentences. I think 3 may be a little too long. We're going to go with a sentence or 2, and it points you in the direction of where you intend to go and how you intend to move into your life, right? So you start off with brainstorming your why. You know, what inspires you and gets you out of the bed in the morning? What's your innate strengths that people have told you, oh, you're really good at this, you're really good at that? What will your measure of success be in life? What do you stand for? What do you stand against? What setbacks have you experienced, and what have they taught you? So many different ways of like experiencing what your why is, how you want to feel each day. So once you brainstorm your why, I think that'll help start with framing that mission statement. And then you want to keep it clear and brief. Like I said, no more than 3. I would probably keep it at 2. And then you want to use positive language. Instead of saying what you don't want to do, you want to point more to what you do want to do or what you want to become. So I have an example below: to live each day with, insert any of your values that we figured out or that you're going to figure out in the previous step. So that, and then what living by these values will give you, whether it's strength, harmony, all those kind of things. And you will do this by whatever specific behaviors that you want to insert to live by those values. So there's many ways to write a mission statement. This is just one example that I wanted to leave you all with. You can easily type in personal mission statement also on Google, and that'll help you figure that out as well. So I do have one. I need to update it actually, but it centers around living life, or just living each day to advocate for others underrepresented in STEM while living my true authentic journey in a nutshell. Again, it's been a while since I've looked at it, but that's kind of what my personal mission statement is. All right, so now we're going to move into needs, knowing your needs. And I don't know if any of you have seen this chart before, but it's what we call our Maslow hierarchy of needs. So this is an idea in psychology, and it was proposed by American psychologist Abraham Maslow around the 1940s. So basically, he subsequently kind of extended this idea to include in his observation kind of humans' innate curiosity. This is more about like human development, and some of that focuses on these different stages of growth in humans. And so when we look at these, we start off with the base at the bottom, which is our basic needs, which are our physiological needs, right? So food, water, shelter, those basic things we need for a human environment. So I do want to note that in saying this, a lot of us sometimes, or a lot of people in this world don't even have their basic needs met, right? And so it's kind of hard to build upon this hierarchy when you are actually struggling with the basic things of, again, water, food. So just noting that that is a pain point or just a real life experience for a lot of people. But moving on, we want to safety. Do you have security? Do you have safety? And sometimes, again, we don't have that met. And then we move more into like kind of psychological, so belongingness and love, as well as our esteem. And the goal is to kind of get to the very top of the pyramid where we have those self-fulfillment needs. And I can tell you now, as a person of a young 32 years, that self-fulfillment part is still needs work. Because a lot of times we're still cycling through the period to really kind of get to where we have that need, those needs met. But just keep in mind what your needs are in whatever environment that you're in, and make sure they're always getting met to the best that they can. So even when you're in school, I know things are a little different now. Sometimes they're virtual, sometimes things are in person, depends on what school you're at. But if you need, I don't know, a sign language interpreter, or you need captions, or you need maybe assistance before a test. I mean, this is more about those are different abilities, but sometimes you need to state what those needs are and make sure that the place or the organization can kind of provide those accommodations. And all starts with trying to get to know what those are. So the last part, my favorite part, is knowing how to get them met. And these are just some of the key things that I tell people that you need to know to knowing how to get them met. So a lot of times that begins with research. Again, the famous questions of who, what, when, where, why, and how. Got to be that scientist. Got to be willing to be curious and kind of figuring out all the information when it comes to any part of self-advocacy. A lot of my life's work is informed by data and evidence. And so I'm really much of figuring out the problem and the solution, and also what's the backup to the solution? What's the backup and the backup to that? So plan A, B, and C. And that's because I sit there and I read and I research. So just making sure you're going in well-informed with anything that you do. Again, but it could be having a conversation with a friend, to talking to a parent, like just having your options all laid out for knowing what they are, I think is very helpful when you're knowing or wanting to get your needs met. Another one is communicating. That's one that we're always working on. I think that's what's showing, confidence is something you constantly have to work at, but being, sure about yourself and, looking eye to eye and not looking down or being like too shy, just showing that sense of confidence and having also a very clear message. A lot of times, even in science, we like to babble on and use jargon and stuff like that, but things being clear and being direct will also help you get what you need faster and in a more intimate way. Some things that some people have to struggle with is being assertive versus aggressive. Sometimes we have these stereotypes that are laid against us, where we realize we have to approach things in different ways. And so we aren't labeled aggressive or sassy or something like that. I know for me, a lot of times that comes with having a very calm tone on not showing emotions per se, even if I am upset, just because even my presence sometimes, I'm tall, I'm like 5'9". If I have on heels, I can be 6 something. And if I have my hair out, it could just be a lot for some people. And I realize that it's really their problem, right? But I do realize when it comes to getting certain things that I met, I have to approach things in a different way. Making things conversational, asking people about themselves, using effective listening skills. Those are some ways. And document everything. Usually when people need to advocate for themselves, they need to show proof to those who are higher up on the ladder, in order to show like maybe incident occurred or they've been doing XYZ for a certain amount of time. Document everything. Knowing how to get them met, ask for advice. Somebody has done this before, whether it's a family member, a sibling, someone that you know, those interested in college, I'm sure at high school, but there's also different resources that you have at school that are available. These are just some at the college level, but I'm sure you have plenty, or at least some in high school, whether it's talking to your guidance counselor, maybe principal, assistant principal, if you're cool with them. I knew mine at least. Different organizations that you have, clubs that you have at high school versus out. There's so many different things, but make sure you have that community with you to really kind of get to that endpoint where you strategize and you execute. And so now, well, before we get there, how many of us have a problem saying no? And so I just want you to put 1 in the chat if you have a problem saying no. Yes. A lot of us do. So I'm gonna ask another question. When's the last time you said no to someone? Mine was today, but think of a time when you said no to someone. You don't have to type this in the chat, but keep it in your mind. And when's the last time you told someone no, or I can't do this because I'm doing this? Like, keep that in mind. And if it's been a while, then now's the time for us to start practicing again. So I think a lot of us struggle with the word no and saying that. Even as kids, we're taught to not say that, even when we want to say no. And so I think it's important to know why we have a hard time. And this is not singling out men, but I noticed for women, we particularly have a hard time saying no. Those who identify as being a woman, we have a hard time saying, right? And I think it starts a little younger. It's a socially learned kind of coping mechanism. Again, we're told, don't say no. That's just rude, or that's not nice. And when really we're setting boundaries at a young age, but again, because of social constructs, we're supposed to be more appeasing, right? Another one is the path of least resistance. If I don't say no, then you're not going to look at me as confrontational. You're not going to look at me as someone who maybe not easy to work with. So I think it's important to realize, like, okay, it's okay to say no, even if it maybe feels harder route. Let's not do the path of least resistance. And it's also, we're expected to, as women, like if I ask sometimes when working in a group, who's gonna take notes? And I always, well now, I do not volunteer. I do not volunteer to take notes because that's always left to a woman to do. And something that I've noticed. So and when it comes to a group, sometimes I will state that. Sometimes I'll say the youngest, and usually people who identify as women are asked to take notes. So I suggest somebody else. Again, that was learned over time. But again, sometimes we're expected to do certain things versus not. And so it comes in, how do we learn to say no? And again, this is a great book. It's called The No Club. That actually went to a presentation of theirs. And so this speaks more in a corporate sense, but I think this applies to any part of life. And so with these authors, it was a group called The No Club that kind of got together and kind of figured out, why do women have a hard time saying no? And so here it says a woman is 50% more likely to volunteer than a man to do a non-promotable task. So keep that in mind. And a non-promotable task is something that you do that does not help you on your promotion track in your career. But in a sense, for like high school, you're doing something, but it does not help you to get to college. It does not help you get better at whatever sports or become the leader or captain of the team. If it doesn't help you, then it's unless you really want to do it, but it doesn't help you get to the next step or where you want to go, you have to be cognizant of that. And one of the ways of how to say no is clearly by practicing, right? Starting there, assessing yourself, assessing in the moment. I try to, whenever I'm asked something, not to immediately say yes, just because I don't want to have an awkward moment, awkward silence, or I want to be seen agreeable. But I think it's important to kind of assess yourself and what your reactions are when someone asks you to do something. And also you want to remember your future you. If I say yes to this today, that's going to impact the plans that I have tomorrow, or it's going to impact something that I have going on in a month or two, where I'm going to be bogged down because I said yes to this. Again, turning off that automatic response. It's a learned thing, but you got to practice it over and over. And also being aware of your triggers when you're kind of cornered. When it is maybe leadership or your parent or whoever, and they kind of will give you an ultimatum or something like that, maybe that triggered you, but just being aware of how your body feels or what you're feeling in the moment. It's a lot of self-reflection, a lot of self-agency when it comes to figuring this out. Another one is negotiating your yes, right? So before you say yes, understand what you're saying yes to. So get that information of the ask. How long is it going to take? What is the expectations? What's going to be the deadline? What's going to be the commitment? Before you say yes, get all the information. Research, like I said earlier. Consider who is asking. Even then, to me, it doesn't really matter who asks. If it's outside of your capabilities, outside of your capabilities. But consider a coworker versus a boss asking something. Maybe there's some relevancy and urgency or not, or maybe someone's just passing it off to you because they don't want to do it. So you also have to keep that in mind. Don't underestimate the cost that it would bring to you. And sometimes you do the yes, no, yes technique. So with that being like, thank you for considering me. I can't really do this at this time, but I know someone else who could, for an example. Also knowing when to say yes. And so again, does this benefit me in any way? So for example, when I worked in lab, someone had to do the ordering, or sometimes even for lab meeting, figure out how we were going to eat. And I would take that over because if I took over ordering, I can order things when I want and have it ready to go. I don't have to go through anybody, take that step out. Or when it comes to food, I got to kind of be in charge of that and be like, okay, today we're going to do Indian, or this next meeting we're going to do Mexican, because I wanted to, because it benefited me, because that's what I wanted to eat that day. So figuring out things when you do say yes, how does it benefit you? How does it fulfill you? And then also, does it have the potential to get you recognized or rewarded? So my current job, I was asked to be on a planning committee for something that was quite significant. And I was immediately told, like, Korie, you might want to get on this because this might have like very high profile and actually might put you up there. So that is something I would say yes to. I work on a team, so we share the workload, but again, keeping that in mind, does this or will this be? So then we'll go on to ways on how to say no. I think this is a good part because sometimes people, how can I say no? Well, what are some ways? There's some examples. And so here are some great ones. Thanks for asking, but I just don't do X, Y, Z. Whatever that could be for you. I've gotten to the point sometimes where I don't even explain, or I don't do X, Y, Z because I don't even put the because. I'm just like, look, I just don't do this. Letting people know immediately, I have a lot on my plate right now. Don't feel like I can give it the attention it deserves. Fair assessment. Someone should be able to see that and then move on to the next option. I wish I could, but there are other things I need to say yes to. Even at my job now, sometimes people will lay out their schedules and kind of describe how busy they are so people know that they can't just immediately take on a task. Cool to say I don't think I'm the right fit, but I do have some resources that might help. Kind of that yes, no, yes situation. Thanks for thinking of me. That's always a favorite of mine to go to because you're showing appreciation. I've thought about you. You're like, oh, it sounds cool. You're giving me another compliment, but I'm trying to limit my commitment to certain things. Or, I'd love to, but I can't. And then again, down to the last part, which is don't explain. Sometimes we over-explain because we're trying to massage a situation, make people feel more comfortable with our choices. But sometimes, again, being that self-advocate and being that person that steps up, you don't have to explain because this is your boundaries and limits, and that's a personal choice, not a choice for everyone. So now you have the tools to help you speak up and prevent burnout. So the first thing you have to do out there is get out there and start practicing. So this is where I will conclude the talk and take any questions that you may have. I hope this was helpful. I hope you found ways to not only advocate for yourself, but also to say no, and build that confidence to be able to do that. It took me years to get to this level. It took me some time, it took me different experiences, it took me with assessing myself and figuring out that kind of self-concept as well. But I'm here, I'm in that space, I'm loving it, I advocate not only for myself, but also for others. And I hope you guys will as well. And so, yes, thank you so much for having me today. And if you have any questions by any means, either unmute yourself or put it in the chat and we can talk about it.
Yeah, everybody, if you want to take a second, think of any questions you have, you can type them or put your the little hand emoticon up, answer any questions that you guys have.
Shy group. I know it's a little late, at least it's late where I'm at. But if you can unmute yourself, we're all friends here. Is this the space?
Yeah.
You guys are a quiet group, huh?
Okay, we have Mia just asked, what if you had a hard time not explaining yourself? So yeah, I think back on the explaining why, like not being able or not doing something that someone's asked.
Right. So thank you for your question, Mia. And I think the hard time comes with practice. And so again, Mia was an evolution because initially I was even scared to like public speaking in front of other people. My voice would go high and it would shrill because I had that anxiety, right? That nervousness that comes with talking to people, even dealing with confrontation. Like for me, it manifests in getting really, especially when I'm angry, getting really hot, voice breaking up. And so I would have these moments where it sounded like I wasn't as confident or didn't, necessarily could express myself or explain myself in a certain way. So a lot of times what I tell people is it's okay to take kind of a break from the immediate conversation and letting people know you'll come back to it. And so when it comes to anything from answering a question, even dealing with something like a microaggression or whatever, taking maybe up to 15 minutes or even however long it be. You don't always have to respond immediately. Walking away, calming yourself down, settling your nerves, going over the problem in your head or the question in your head, and kind of taking that moment to really kind of, again, strategize and execute how you're going to answer the question or whatever was posed to you. And so I think that comes a lot with practice, and practice makes permanent, not perfect. And so you're not going to get it perfect every time. And even explaining yourself, you're going to go back. Even now, I still go, dang, I could have said this differently. I should have added this in. Please do this. Especially when it comes to my brother and his comebacks. Sometimes, I try to think of better ones. And so I think that's going to just take time for you to just consistently practice being able to explain yourself. And a lot of that might be self-talk. It might be journaling. It might be talking with friends to really figure out your feelings, even if it's like a hard topic, or even not saying anything. Certain political issues or certain hot topics that people might ask you. It doesn't always mean you need to give an immediate response. Sometimes it's okay to say, hey, I'm not that well informed on that topic, so I can't really comment. Or, I'm really overwhelmed right now, so I don't think I can give you the effective answer that you need, but maybe we can come back to that tomorrow. So then that gives you time to prepare or come back with an opinion or an answer. So that was a little bit long-winded, but I hope that helped as far as like having a hard time explaining yourself.
Yeah, no, I think that was a really good question, Mia, because I think, and like a really helpful response. I think sometimes that it is difficult it's smart to give yourself time to like think through like what you would respond with. Ada asked, how would you recommend advocating for yourself when you're just starting out in a position or path? What would you say is the best way to convey your message or mission to others?
Right. Great question. Thank you, Ada. I appreciate that. Okay, yeah, just starting out, right? So I'm trying to think of a good example. And I think a lot of it, so again, I told you at the beginning, I get a lot of it from my mom. So my mom would push me in ways to advocate for myself in the very beginning. So like when I went on to college, she was like, all right, now here's your birth certificate, here's your passport, here's like all these things you need to operate as an adult in life. But she would be there, I think, to answer the phone when I had specific questions. Like, Mom, I set this appointment, what do I ask them? Even when it came to car appointments, I was all called by myself, I was taking the car in, and she would be like, make sure if they fix a part that they put it in the trunk. Tell them to put it in the trunk, because a lot of times mechanics will try to get over on women and charge you extra or not fix the part and still charge you. So she was like, to verify that someone did, make sure that they did this. So in the beginning, it was hard to say that to someone when I'm by myself and, you know, with this like mechanic covered in like dirt, grease, and like has a wrench in his hand. But to me, I guess I finally got to the point where it was like, what do I have to lose? If I don't say something, I know they're not going to say something. And I know that no one's going to care about me more than me. And so I kind of started to get over that fear of like ruffling feathers and advocating for myself, even at a young age, because I have a responsibility to myself. I have a responsibility to treat myself a certain way, and I also have a responsibility to show others to treat me. And I think once you get to a certain point where you realize like that's a part of your values or your needs, it becomes less and less difficult to really advocate yourself, no matter what age, what position you are in life. And then you have those values, you have those needs that you have thought about, and you've got to make sure that they get met first off as a person, having a self-agency. So I think starting out, regardless, it's just letting people know like this is you, like, hey, I don't drink, so please stop asking me, or hey, I don't do this, or just like letting people sometimes know off bat, like this is just who I am, and you know, you could either like me or you couldn't. Like sometimes I know we're seeking a lot of self-approval. I remember me being in high school, my sister being in high school, wondering what friends think and people think, and even with parents, of course, they want this feeling or they have this idea of what you need to do, but I think letting them know and letting people know early on what you want, what you need, and how they should treat you is going to do nothing but take you so many places in the long run. So I hope that helped. I think the best way to convey a message or mission to others is just really letting them know and communicating with them. A lot of people, I'm going to say, are genuinely nice and understanding, and I think that just comes with being direct, having that message kind of whatever it is, as far as writing your values and your needs and having that personal mission statement and being like, hey, this is me. This is what I value. This is my interest. This is what I want to do to succeed in life. Or just having kind of that message always ready to go. That's why you guys should definitely do the personal mission statement. It's a great way to convey that message. Again, journaling, writing, meditation, allowing yourself to center more on that self-concept and understanding more of who you are will get you there. So in a nutshell, it's understanding self. You really have to practice that and understand that, I think, now, and even as you evolve and move on to different parts of it. Hope that was helpful.
Yeah. I think we have time to take one more question. Ellen asked, how do you advocate or negotiate better for yourself, especially if there are risks or ramifications that may come?
So yeah, great question. I think if I said your name wrong, please forgive me. So I just took a negotiation course, and we have what you call your BATNA, which is what we call your best alternative to negotiated agreement. And so what that means is, if you don't get what you want, what's your best alternative? Or what's going to be the best alternative if you don't reach a planned agreement? And so what I'm saying is you go into an argument maybe already knowing the risks and ramifications, but knowing how to deal with them afterwards, right? There's another term called ZOPA, which is your zone. Like if a person is here, this is what they need as far as an agreement to be reached or a negotiation, and yours is down here, then you're going to meet somewhere, try to meet somewhere in the middle. And sometimes that means leaving certain things out or not reaching to everything that you want. But my point is that you go in knowing and being prepared, but also having alternatives. So having a plan A, B, and C. And so I think with advocating or negotiating better for yourself, let's just do an example. Salaries. So I'm all about equal pay and learning and salary kind of transparency. Doing your research on the market, knowing how much a job pays versus whether it's on Indeed or USA Jobs, knowing if a job is transparent about their salary ranges, asking about salary ranges. And once you have that information, you can go in knowing, okay, I'm going to ask for this price as far as my salary is concerned, but I will not settle, but the price that I will actually confirm for my salary, if I can't reach this, will be this, or I'll walk away. And so knowing that the risk of the ramification sometimes is more of a redirection and not necessarily something that is really a negative. Sometimes maybe that job just wasn't for you, or that work environment you didn't know was really completely toxic. And so you actually saved yourself some time and some energy, right? And so I think it's important to figure out initially what all the risks and ramifications are. Because sometimes you may be blinded to them because you're so focused on one that has a huge negative, versus being okay, so if I don't get into this school, then maybe I can do community college for 2 years and then go to the school of my dreams. That is an alternative. That might have some risk to it, but it's an alternative that people do every day. Or if I can't do this, maybe I'll work for a year. Or for me, I didn't know what I was going to do after my college degree, but I was okay, the worst thing is I'm going to figure it out. I mean, the worst thing is I would be homeless, but I knew that wasn't. So I just kept figuring out what the alternatives are, what could I do, and not necessarily looking at the risk or the ramification. That's the end all be all. So thank you for your question. I hope that was helpful.
Yeah, thank you so much, everyone who asked questions. And thank you so much, Korie, for answering them. I think super, super helpful stuff and really great questions from everybody. If you guys, if anybody thinks of a question that you didn't get a chance to ask tonight, you can always either put it in the Slack channel or email it to outreach@SWE.org, and we'll connect it with Korie and get your question answered. But we are basically at the end of the session. Thanks so much, everybody who attended. Thank you so much, Korie, for speaking with us. It was so informative and I think incredibly helpful, developing skills for self-advocacy and, just really being, you're a strong supporter for yourself. I really quick want to give one more shout out to our sponsors, Amateur Radio Hour and Digital Communications, Danaher Corporation, General Motors, and Turner Construction. Also a shout out to all of our HQ SWE staff who is in here helping out today in this session. And then just a reminder for everybody here, the next SWE live session that we're going to have is going to be Beat the Algorithm, How to Stand Out and Nail the Interview. And that will be on Monday, April 17th at 6:30 p.m. Central Time. But you'll get messages about that leading up to that. But yeah, thank you so much, Korie. And thank you, everybody, for being in this session today. I hope everybody has a good rest of your night.